All right. Good afternoon and welcome, everyone. This is session E1. The topic is New Director Mini Academy. My name is Punam Bedi. I'm a consultant with the Commission, and I'll be facilitating this session. And just so everyone is aware, this session is indeed being recorded. So as the presenters progress through this presentation, please feel free to drop any questions that you might have in the chat, and they will be addressed periodically throughout this session. And as you all are entering, if you could please put your name, type of program, and program name into the chat, along with how long you've been in your current position, that would be great. We talked about the questions. Again, just feel free to drop your questions in the chat, and they'll be addressed. Your microphone should already be muted. You know that the meeting is being recorded, and we ask for your grace and patience in this presentation. And now I'd like to turn things over to our three lovely presenters.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate it. We want to welcome all of you to this session. My name is Julie Sheldon, and I am the coordinator of the Walnut Valley Consortium. I have a teacher and administrator induction program. And since they asked us to give a little personal information, I am a baker and obsessed with the Great British Baking Show. And Catherine?
Hello, and thank you. My name is Catherine Tolliver. I'm from Green Dot Public Schools, and I oversee teacher induction, and I have been in this role for 9 years. I can attest Julie is a wonderful baker. But if I had to give a fun fact about myself, I have a fur baby. I have 2 children, yes, but I have a fur baby, and I'm so proud of him, and he's 8 months old. Sochi?
Hello, everyone. Welcome to this session. My name is Sochi Avian. I am with Green Dot Public Schools, and I oversee 2 programs. One is the preliminary administrative credentials through our administrator in residence program, and I have been also overseeing our Clear Admin Services Credential Induction Program in the last 2 years. Something, just to share on a personal note, I have a 15-year-old daughter who is my pride and joy. Her name is Ariana, bright 10th grader, and looking forward to now colleges in the next couple of years.
Okay, so we're going to move into our presentation. Part of the reason we ask your grace and patience is we have been tasked with creating a presentation in 50 minutes. That was previously a full day long. So what we've tried to do is give you the high points and then also reference some resources and hope to help you gather a group of resources so you can have support beyond this conference and throughout your career. So the agenda, we're going to be talking about the difference between teacher induction and administrative services induction. There's a lot of similarities, but there's some important differences. Some program considerations you want to think about as you are leading your program, the nuts and bolts of induction, how you can build collaboration in your program and outside of your program, where to find some really important CTC resources, important facts about accreditation. Some of you may have already attended something on accreditation, but this is an overview of the accreditation cycle, and then we'll close it up. And as we complete each section, we will address your questions. So if you could keep those questions to broader context, that would be great. That would benefit the whole group. And if you have something more specific after the session, we'll hang out a little bit and you can ask some more specific things.
And before we move forward, sorry, Julie, I just want to interrupt for a moment. We also have PSD Director Terry Clark in this presentation. So Terry, if you don't mind introducing yourself.
Happy to introduce myself. I'm Terry Clark, the Director of the Professional Services Division, and staff is always a resource to you if you have questions. So please let us know, contact us, and I'm looking forward to the presentation.
Thank you.
So here we are. We have a teacher induction versus administrator induction. As Julie mentioned before, they're paralleled. You could actually see both, and there's many things that are very similar. So we're going to go ahead and go through that. All of these programs, both programs begin in the first year of service under the preliminary credential. It builds on preliminary experience through the transition documents that candidates receive from their learning institution. They're both job embedded experiences, and there is really no coursework, that they need to take. Then they both also focus on the standards, the CSTPs for the teacher program or the capsules for the administrator services. It is candidate driven, so it is an individualized plan. It is an inquiry method used to demonstrate candidate growth, and it is about reflection. This is all about reflection. The components, the coaching and mentoring starts within 30 days of enrollment, and there's targeted professional development to address professional standards. The individualized induction plan mirrors the individualized learning plan from the teacher program. We actually have a rubric evaluation. It is a 2-year experience, and there's a requirement for early completion option. And there's a required input from the employer. We also need to go ahead and make sure that annual evaluation of the mentor performance with retention or release. Next slide, please. So here are the, the differences that you could have from administrator induction and teacher induction. In administrator induction, we require a number of coaching hours per year with face-to-face requirement, and these are between 40 to 60 hours per year. In teacher induction, teachers receive an average of not less than 1 hour per week of individualized support or mentoring. There's also the required number of professional development hours per year, anywhere between 20 and 30 hours. For teacher induction, there's no direct mention of professional development parameters other than outlined in the individualized learning plan. For administration, there's mandatory benchmarks analysis at midpoint. There's also a baseline competence level to be recommended for the credential determined by programs. So the candidate has to have reached a level of competence meeting in order to get their clear administrative services credential. On the other hand, in teacher induction, candidate development and growth and progress towards mastery on the CSTP is sufficient for them to be recommended for their credential. And then 2 years for the administrators, 2 years of successful experience is required for recommendation for the clear credential. It's a prerequisite. And for the teacher, there's no evaluation of successful experience required for the clear credential. For admin, programs have the discretion to shorten the program for candidates who have evidence of stellar capsule practice. And for teacher, early completion option is required, listed in the preconditions. There's no determined day requirement for writing the IIP, yet, we highly recommend that is within the first 30 days so that the candidate could go ahead and begin. And then for teachers, it's a 60-day to write their initial ILP. And then for program, for admin, program determines coaches the qualifications, including matching of job positions. But in the teacher program, the mentor must match grade level and or subject area.
Okay, so there's a lot of things you need to think about when you're leading an induction program. So we listed a few here. There's certainly more than this, but one of the things that's really key is having a communication system with stakeholders. And those stakeholders include not just candidates and mentors, or coaches. It's with district leadership, it's with IHEs, with administrators at the sites. So you want to have a communication system in place to communicate what the program's requirements are, and also each stakeholder's role in the organization and how they can help with induction. It's important to develop written MOUs, certainly for your candidates and your mentors and coaches. You want to have the requirements for their role clearly communicated and written out. This will save you a lot of trouble later on, and it will help you communicate equitably with all of the groups and all of the people who are in the program. You also want to make sure that you're individualizing your program based on your program needs, but to do it within the standards. So you always want to use those program standards and common standards as your Bible, as your guide for everything that you do. But there's a lot of individualization that can happen, and getting input from those stakeholders is a great way to make sure that it's meeting the needs of all of the people involved in the program. It's important to build teams. That's a big job running an induction program. So if you have teams of, first the advisory or steering committee is a great team to have, teams within district administration. If you're a consortium like my program is, I have a team that has liaisons in each of my districts, and we work on using data to make program improvements. You can also have lead mentor teams to help advise your program, but don't try to do it on your own. The more input you have, the more effective your program will be. It's also important to be visible. Induction is a quiet program. Usually the communication between the mentor and the candidate happens in the classroom. The work that you do is quiet, and especially if you run a really solid efficient program, it's easy to ignore. So it's important to be visible at the school sites when we're allowed to again, be visible to all the stakeholders so that they're reminded of the value of the program and their role within that program. It's important to acknowledge the various district and site cultures. So the more communication you have with site principals, with district leadership and their needs, the better you're able to individualize your program and make it as effective as possible. And also build some capacity for shared leadership, certainly at the district level, if you're a single district program, or even as a consortium with those liaisons and those assistant soups or soups in the various districts. It's important that you're not the only one leading the program so that you have a wider base of support. Are there any questions about this particular list? Okay, I don't see any, so we'll move along.
Catherine, you are mute.
There are a lot of nuts and bolts when you think about how you run your program, but we're just going to highlight some very high-level things. And so the mentor coaching, training, collaboration, and feedback is very important. And so both programs require matching of a mentor to a candidate within the first 30 days of program enrollment. And this is very important because we want support to begin as soon as possible in whatever role that candidates are in, whether it be teacher or administration. And sometimes we know that programs run into the difficulty of matching credential to credential. And so you want to do as much as you can to find that exact mentor match when it comes to teachers as well as admin. In the event that you're not able to find that exact match, you definitely still need to assign a mentor, but you really want to be very specific and intentional with coordinating support. And so, for example, if you have a candidate that's not an exact match, you want to make sure that there's someone at the school site or at the district level that can provide that specific support needed within that credential area. Mentor training and collaboration opportunities are essential. You definitely want to train your mentors on the program structures and being accountable to the work. Also, the candidate's goal setting is really important, and so your mentors need to know what it means to support candidates in goal setting, and then also looking to promoting the professional growth of the candidate. Going over and training with mentor instruments, what makes your program run? And you want to make sure that your mentors know inside and out the program structure and what makes the program run. We want to provide training in adult learning, and definitely the mentor should have training in the inquiry cycles that you have implemented within your program. Collaboration is key, and so you want to provide collaboration opportunities between the mentors to go over inquiry cycles, discuss problems of practice that could be common across the program, and really looking at program activities, professional development opportunities to support candidate growth. These are enriching opportunities for mentors to collaborate with one another and share best practices. As a program, you want to provide formative feedback to your mentors and have a system of evaluating your mentors and their effectiveness. And that ranges from program to program. So as we had mentioned earlier, we are a community and we offer support, and we can discuss further what that could potentially look like. But you definitely want to be able to provide your mentors feedback in the work that they're doing. Next slide. Another aspect that's really important to program operations is collecting and using program data. And so you definitely want to be able to identify your program strengths, what's going well in your program. You want to celebrate your successes, but you also want to take a look at areas for growth and how you can improve your program. As Julie had mentioned before, you can have a well-running program, but there's always room for improvement. And so largely this information is collected through survey data. And so you want to measure the effectiveness of your mentors. What or how do your candidates measure the effectiveness in how the mentor supports them? You want to also see how much time is being spent with the candidates. We have program requirements to have 30 to 40 30 hours of coaching in admin, and then on average 1 hour per week with teachers. And so we want to make sure that that is actually happening. You want to get feedback on the learning plans, their development, and how candidates progress in their individual goals. You want to see where candidates are focusing on the CSTP or the capsules, and what research activities they might be participating in to foster that professional growth. Looking at the effectiveness of professional learning opportunities, are candidates being able to analyze that data and take that observation feedback and any other activities that collaboratively happen between the mentor and the candidate. You also want to think about the level of program support to the candidates and the mentors. How are we as a program supporting our mentors? We want to get feedback from them to ensure that we're giving them what they need to work with the candidates in our program. You want to think about the impact of the program experience on the candidate growth. Do candidates believe that this program is really fostering their growth in their professional practice? And looking at the impact of the program experience on student achievement or overall leadership of a school. Next slide. And we also want you to know that there are fiscal considerations operating a program. And so every program should have a budget. And what's listed here is just minimum, what we recommend. You do want to budget in for the commission's accreditation fees to operate your program. Paying your mentors, that's usually a big budget item, and you want to make sure that you budget for the stipends that you will pay your mentors. Looking at any other operational costs for a program. And then we also want to include attending the annual induction conference and any accommodations for who you'll be sending to this conference. And then looking at professional learning opportunities for not just your candidates, but also your mentors. Any professional development facilitators that you have coming in, books or training materials, and any other conference or seminar attendance. These are all fiscal considerations for your program. And so with that being said, let's take a look at if there are any questions.
Yes, there's one question in the chat. The question is from Jen. She's asking, is there an opportunity for more in-depth training for newbies this school year?
So currently there isn't, but you are going to be filling out an evaluation. And if that's something that you want, you can put that in the evaluation that that's something you're requesting. And I'm sure that either our group or another group will work with the CTC to make sure that happens.
And Jen, if you're subscribed to the PSD e-news, there are induction office hours that are conducted with our performance assessment team to get support for Cal TPA and other matters. But like Julie said, definitely put that information into the feedback form. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so now we're going to talk about collaboration because that is super important. It's very easy to get isolated as a leader of an induction program, but the survival of your program and of your mental health depends on collaboration. And so one of the things that is still kind of in place are cluster groups. You can see our backgrounds on our Zoom photos. We're the Greater Los Angeles Cluster 4. And so we still meet 3 or 4 times per year as a big group to collaborate. Other cluster areas, they're no longer defined as they were before, but they're usually by region. And so you can check with the CTC, especially Gay Roby, because she has information about leaders in each of those cluster areas. The great thing about the cluster groups is that networking across. That's one of the things I miss most about this conference is the chance to just chat with other professionals and get ideas. And that's what those cluster meetings are great for. So if you haven't gotten a chance to find out, reach out and see if you can collaborate with other directors in your regional area. You also want to collaborate with institutions of higher learning, IHGs. And usually there is a partnership of programs with the IHGs to be able to get units for induction, or you have a lot of candidates come from certain universities in your area. It's a great thing to have collaboration, especially if you have IHG members on your advisory or steering committee. It makes the transition from teacher preparation to induction so much smoother. But also now, especially with the variable term waivers and the executive order credentials, it's really important to be talking with your IHE partners about how to serve the needs of the candidates as best you can. There are also some CTC think tanks and office hours. So if you subscribe to PSD News, they will put those hours in there. And what's great about those is you're not by yourself. Usually during those hours, there's a group of other directors, not just new. I have certainly participated in those this year myself, and I've been doing this for 10 years because I can always learn more, and especially this year, there's been a lot of things that need to be adjusted. So it's a great way to network with other people, and they often ask questions that you wished you had asked, and you get information that way. It's also important to collaborate with district leadership. As I mentioned earlier, it's important for the districts to value the induction program and to have a voice in the induction program so that they see how the district goals and the site goals and the induction goals all can work together to support effective teachers. And that is really the highest priority of the districts, to make sure that every student has an effective teacher, and that's the reason we do what we do. So as much as you possibly can, involve district leadership in communicating with them, collaborating. You want to still maintain the confidentiality about specific candidates and the communications, but in program design, their help and their input is invaluable. Any questions about this?
There's a question from Christian asking, what is the name of the group you mentioned?
The cluster groups, they're usually in cluster numbers. So we're cluster 4, but they were organized a long time ago by the CTC by region. There used to be cluster regional directors for every cluster, and that position went away, but a lot of those cluster groups are still meeting and still collaborating together. So it's important to find out which is your regional cluster and who you can reach out to. I hope that helped. Oh, PSD News. There's actually a link at the end, and you will get weekly updates about CTC News, the hours for think tanks and for office hours. Anything you need to know is in the PSD News, and we have a link later in the presentation for that.
Thank you, Julie, for that follow-up.
All right, the CTC website resources. Oh, what a valuable resource that we have. So I call it the hub because it's really where everything is centralized. And it's as simple as typing www.ctc.ca.gov. So this is the actual page. It's beautiful, it's been upgraded, and it has a plethora of resources. Next slide, please. So when you go there, you just simply click on program sponsors, and another page, lights up. And you would have preconditions and standards, accreditation forms, program sponsors and alerts, accreditation technical assistance, program sponsor fees, grant funded programs, and approved institutions and programs. So all of that is there. Next slide, please. One of the tabs that I always, go to is accreditation, and I actually have it bookmarked in my Google. So that way I just go straight to it, and I don't have to go through all the steps. And here you're going to go ahead and see all the various. There's a menu on the right that has even more, links. So if we could go there, please, by the next slide. So we have preparation programs, and there's different links to that. Then we have everything that you need to learn about accreditation, and so you have it right there as well. And then committee on accreditation and more resources, and just another tab with other topics that do not necessarily fit into the other categories. But this is where you would actually find anything and everything that you would actually need. A lot of the different links, take you, to kind of like the same types of materials. So once again, I would, really, really say that this is your one-stop shop where you could find everything that you need. Next slide, please. In accreditation, if you go to preparation programs, and actually put the little error, the first one in the wrong bullet, but it's teacher induction. There's 2 pages. There's one for teacher induction, and that's where the first error should be, and then the administrative services APA. So there's a teacher induction page. So if you go into teacher induction, it's going to take you to the teacher induction page. If you go to the Administrative Services and APA, it's going to go ahead and take you to the Administrative Induction page. So once again, it's like, just if you want to take a look at pertinent details of the program that you are servicing, then here is, again, one-stop shop. You could actually bookmark it as well, and it's an easy link to be able to access. I think that Julie and Catherine were talking about the PSD e-news. I cannot tell you how valuable this is. And when I became a director, and Catherine actually, who said, socially, have you subscribed to the PSD news? I said, what's that? And she sent me the link, and my eyes opened up. On a weekly basis on Friday, we get everything, all the news. And what's wonderful about this is that they give you, the CTC gives you what is new, and also they still list, what is important and that we should continue to keep in mind. So if you haven't done so already, I would highly recommend that you please, subscribe to this so that you could start as soon as this Friday getting your notifications. So subscribe to this. Very important. We cannot stress this enough. And it is just such a valuable resource. Next, please. Also, the CTC YouTube channel is another invaluable resource for us. And I believe that this is where all of these recordings are going to go ahead and pop up at the YouTube channel. So we're going to all be famous here. And this is another valuable stop shop. So if you haven't subscribed, please do so. You just have to go into YouTube and look for California Commission on Teacher Credentialing. This should pop up, and you could actually click the subscribe button. If not, you could actually go into that particular website and be able to subscribe. Here's a list of all the resources. So you have the accreditation page, just so you could bookmark it. The accreditation handbook is also very important. It gives you all the ins and outs about what you should think about it, when we're talking about accreditation. And Julie's going to be walking us over the accreditation cycle in a minute. There's also the accreditation framework and commission adopted standards, the cohort consultant support. And this is, we were talking, I don't know if you went to other breakout sessions where we talked about the various groups, but there's a blue, an indigo, a yellow. So if you have any questions for your consultant, all you have to do is PSD and then the color of your cohort at ctc.ca.gov. And that would be for, it will take you and route you to the correct person. And then, of course, there's a program sponsor alerts, which all of this, again, you find at that hub, program sponsors, and you would also be able to access that through any of those, list of different categories. And I believe it's accreditation with Julie now.
Okay, so I think there was a couple questions. You will have access. In fact, the folder, if you look at the agenda for today, there's a folder of resources, and this slides, all these slides are there with all the resources as well. And then I'm going to ask one of my partners to put the PSD news subscription link in the chat, so you have that one. And I'm going to talk a little bit about accreditation cycle.
So Leslie, sorry to interrupt you. Leslie has dropped in the link to the PSD e-news, so thank you, Leslie, for doing so. And then we'll be sure to get the link to the Google Drive in there as soon as possible as well for the presentation.
And Christy, thank you so much for putting in the link to the cluster areas as well. Thank you so much for that. Okay, so every induction leader needs to know the accreditation cycle. And I'm sure that's at the top of your mind because that is one of the primary roles that induction leaders fulfill. And so it is a 7-year accreditation cycle. And depending on your color cohort, the color cohort that your program is in, you are somewhere on that cycle because it rotates through those 7 years for everyone. I have a link later in the presentation that you can check and see which color cohort you're in. I'm not sure it's completely up to date, so if you don't see your program, you'll want to contact the CTC for that. So years 1 through 7, there's an expectation that you're going to be collecting data about your program. Most directors do a mid-year survey and an end-of-year survey. There's also a completer survey that the state does for people who are completing the program and applying for their credential. They have an optional survey offered to them as part of that process. But you also want to be collecting your own program data. This is part of accreditation. And at some point, you're going to be asked to submit some of that data. We'll get some more guidance later on for that, but it's for informing your program improvement. So years 1 and 4 is preconditions submission and review. So there are instructions for the preconditions, and you're going to submit them, and a CTC consultant will review them and let you know if they have any questions or need more information after they're submitted. So they're submitted twice, year 1 and 4. Year 5 is program review and common standards submission and review. And that is where you're going to do some writing. You're going to be gathering evidence. They're very clear on the template on what kind of evidence they want. There will be reviewers from the Board of Institutional Review, which is directors like all of us. We all contribute to the Board of Institutional Review once we've had that training and give feedback. Year 6, you have a site visit. And so some of the people who are reading the program review documents and the common standard submissions will be on your site visit team. And you will also have a commission consultant for this site visit. And they'll be doing interviews with all of the stakeholders in your program to determine whether your program is aligned with the preconditions, the common standards, and applicable program standards. So if you have only a teacher induction program, it'll be those induction standards. If you have both administrative services and teacher induction, it will be both sets of program standards. And then year 7 is a year that if anything needs to be addressed from that site visit, year 7 is when it's addressed. So we're going to go into a little bit more specifics. Next slide, please. Okay, so one of the important things to remember is you are going to need to create an accreditation website. It's pretty simple. You can just do a Google site. It does not have to be complicated or fancy, but there has to be a site for the readers and reviewers and the site visit team to be able to access your documents and your evidence. So you want to begin the website with the preconditions, and there will be specific evidence that the CTC is going to ask for. And then you're going to add to it as you get to program review and common standards review. You upload evidence, and then also your site visit team will access that website and any evidence that they want to have you submit. It facilitates the ease of presenting information. Back in the olden days when I started, it was all paper, and it is not paper anymore. It's all electronic. And so having it all on that website makes things much simpler for you and for anyone who's accessing it. And we want to keep those reviewers happy and keep the job easy. Next slide, please. So some of that evidence is you're going to want to include your survey data. That's important to have. Your candidate performance assessment data. So you have to have as part of the program standards, you have to have a transparent system of being able to see if the teachers that you're serving are showing competency, and if they have move towards competency in the standards. So there has to be some assessment data for that. Your program effectiveness data, and you want to think about that. How can you show that your program is effective? Not just by asking stakeholders questions, but gathering some evidence of your program effectiveness. And there's a number of ways to do that. Some of those indicators are included in the data warehouse, including those completer survey results. Those are now housed in the data warehouse, and in the future we'll be adding more to that. And then those stakeholder interviews are critical. So in site visit, they want to talk to every person who's involved in your program in any way and get feedback directly from those stakeholders. Okay, next. So preconditions. You need to submit documentation to address both the general preconditions and the preconditions for the commission approved programs. So there's two sets of preconditions. It's important to know. You can go to the precondition site on the CTC website. You can download those and get some guidance for that. There is a guidance document that we have linked to this presentation. And those preconditions are grounded in ed code, in regulations, and in policy. And so those are non-negotiable. You have to meet the preconditions. And if they are not fully met, if the CTC says they are not fully met after they've reviewed your submission, they have to be resolved immediately. These are critical. So March 31st is precondition submission, and my program's in the yellow cohort. And so March 31st, I need to have my submission in. You want to find out what color cohort you're in if you haven't already, so that you know which year, and this is also on the CTC website. You can click on the schedule based on the color that your program belongs to. And those are the years that you're going to be submitting the preconditions, and they're always due March 31st. Then program review is in year 5. That's always due on October 15th. And what happens is it's reviewed by a pair of reviewers. Again, these are people who have been trained, BIR trained. They are directors and program leaders who have volunteered to be trained and who read the submissions. They're going to give you some feedback, and it's going to be based on the required evidence. You don't have to write a lot. In fact, they limit how much narrative that you can write based on the template, but they want specific evidence for those reviewers to look at. So way, way, way before October 15th, you want to be looking at what kind of evidence you're going to need for that fall and making sure that you're gathering it as you go. Then the results of that submission and what the reviewers have given you feedback on, that's used to inform and focus the site visit team in the institution. And so if the team who reviewed your program review have questions and asked for additional evidence, you're going to prepare an addendum, and that's going to include either the answers to those questions or the additional evidence for the site visit team. And then some of those program reviewers will be on your site visit team, so they'll already be familiar with your program. Then the common standards are February 28th, so that's a busy year for you when you have both of those. And again, the year before, you want to look at it and see what kind of evidence you're going to need to be gathering, because it's hard to do last minute. They're again asking for specific evidence. Now, the common standards apply to both induction programs and teacher preparation programs. So they're written in almost IHE terms. So it's important to talk with the consultant that you're assigned. You will be assigned a CTC consultant to translate into induction language. But these are common standards for every program. Again, not much narrative, so thank goodness, not a lot of writing, but they do want specific pieces of evidence. And if they ask for it, give that to them. It is reviewed by a site visit team member, usually a team member and the team lead from your site visit, so they're familiar with your program. And they have there's just one review. They will give you feedback, and then you'll address that feedback with additional evidence or answers to questions with an addendum put on your accreditation website that the site visit team will access within 60 days of your site visit.
Okay, I'm just doing a time check. We have about 4 minutes left.
Oh, goodness. It's going fast. Okay, so the site visit, you're going to get a lot more information about that when you're assigned a consultant 9 to 12 months beforehand, and they will help you through everything. And basically what it does is it verifies that you're aligned with the standards and you're implementing your program effectively. The site visit team is reviewers who have already read a lot of your evidence and documentation, so they're very familiar with your program. And based on what the site visit team finds and recommends to the COA, you may need more frequent visits afterwards or other follow-up activities. And that is the next slide. That is year 7. Oh, I talked about that a little bit. Have to have everything on the website 60 days in advance, but you may have a follow-up. So if there's any stipulations that the COA recommends from that site visit, they might require more reports or a revisit for the state consultant and the team lead. And if, however, the site visit and the COA determine that all of the standards are fully met, you have a free year in year 7 and you don't need to submit anything. Okay, so Catherine already talked a little bit about the program surveys. We want to make sure that you are gathering survey data all the way through every year, and that it's informing program improvement. Okay, and there is, like I said before, a program completer survey that you will get data for. It runs September through August, and then you will get your own program data from the people who have completed that survey. And annual data submission, all right, we're moving through this super fast. The annual data submission, the ADS, you need to make sure that you have the correct contact information in the ADS. They will prompt you for that, and they'll also ask each year, it's usually due in August, information about your programs, your program requirements, the pathways, and then also the demographic data from your candidates for your first year candidates. So finding a way to gather that demographic data is important. So find out what questions they'll be asking so that you know what to gather as you are getting ready to complete that survey. Okay, there are resources. The ADS website is right there, and there are office hours available. If you subscribe to PSD News, you will be able to see those office hours, and they'll give you updates about ADS and what you need to submit and when. Okay, and if you have questions about accreditation, there is a email address that is completely devoted to those as you go through. There's also information in the PSD News for those as well.
So in closing, next slide. It's important to know that leaders become great not because of their power, but because of their ability to empower others. And so as leaders of induction, we empower our candidates, and that makes what makes a good leader. And finally, you are not alone. You are supported. You have us, you have the commission, you have a whole large community that is here to support you as you continue to learn and grow your program. And so for that, we thank you for attending our session. And if you have any questions or you just want to reach out or find out how we do things in our programs, here's contact information for all of us. please feel free to send us emails and we will do our best to support you in any way we can. Thank you for attending.
I was wondering if there was time for a quick question.
Go ahead.
It'd be more for the CTC folks, but I have an issue that I've been trying to get through because a credential candidate didn't complete his recommendation and pay for his fees. And I don't have access yet to recommend him, and my assistant is out. And I have multiple emails into the consortium, but at this point, he's out of the classroom and I need to get him recommended as soon as possible.
Definitely reach out to our credentials unit. It's infoservices@ctc.ca.gov. And they should be able to direct you. It sounds like you would need access to CTC Online to be able to make those recommendations, so that way you can go through the paperwork so that you can.
Sent to CTC Online both a so one, I submitted the paperwork to make sure that I get to be a recommender, or my boss did. And then the other piece, my assistant, I got her login, but she was locked out. And so I've got 2 emails out. It's been 3 days. And so this teacher's out of the classroom and nobody's responding.
Wow, okay. Let me drop to you my email, Jen, and then email me the situation and I will reach out to our credentialing unit.
Poonam, I appreciate it greatly.
Definitely.
I will send you an email.
Okay, so I dropped that in the chat.
Awesome.
And hopefully we can get that resolved. Thanks, Jen.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. And thank you so much to our presenters. I know we're kind of pushing into the closing session time, but thank you so much to the 3 of you for presenting this valuable information for us.
Yes, great info.
It's our pleasure. Thank you.
Our pleasure. Thank you.